The Gatecrasher by Chris Harvey. Part 2. Mandy was beginning to feel faint and sick. She prayed that she would pass out before she felt any pain. The masked figure lowered the knife slightly and cocked its head to one side. Then it reached up and took hold of the mask, and in one quick movement ripped it off its face. "Happy Halloween, Mandy Barnes!" The beaming, sweat-beaded face of Danny Clark smiled down at her, his arms spread, palms open towards her. He dropped his mouth open as if to proclaim, "Ta-da!" Mandy's eyes widened, recognition and anger now registering. But Danny was still playing the innocent schoolboy. "Well, what do you reckon of the costume, eh?" "What the hell are you doing?" She managed to spit the words out. Danny was still looking pleased with himself, seemingly unaware of the terrifying ordeal that he had put her through. "Why, give you a fright, did I?" "Give me a fright?" Sarcasm was joining her mounting anger. "No, you didn't give me a fright, Danny." The lad gave a false frown of disappointment. "You scared the crap out of me, you idiot!" The flat of her hand caught Danny square on the cheekbone with considerable force, violently forcing his head to one side. Moaning more in shock than in pain, Danny snatched his hands to the stinging flesh and turned back quickly to face his assailant, eyes wide and questioning. "What was that for? What do you think, you dickhead?" "I was only messing around. I thought you'd have known him. It is Halloween." "Messing around?" She hissed the words through clenched teeth. "That wasn't messing around, it was sick." "Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't think it'd fool you, honest. I thought you'd just turn around and laugh." "Yeah, well, you went too far, didn't you?" She gazed at Danny's face, hands clamped to his cheek, eyes wide and hurt, and he suddenly reminded her of an innocent child that had been scolded for something it hadn't done. Danny was usually masculine and handsome, but now he looked so young and pitiful. A smile broke across Mandy's lips, became a giggle, and she lifted a hand to cover her mouth almost guiltily. She had suddenly seen the funny side of it all. "What's funny?" Danny asked with a bemused frown. Mandy shook her head, trying to answer him through her chuckles. "You're an idiot. Do you know that, Danny?" "Well, I had an idea," he laughed. All the tension and anger had now evaporated, and Mandy suddenly remembered that there was a party to be had. "Come in." Danny stepped in, his gaze immediately falling upon the impressive spread of food upon the large table. As Mandy moved to close the door, she noticed Danny's mask and the knife on the ground outside. She realized that he must have dropped them when she hit him and reached down to pick them up. "This looks delicious. I'm well impressed, Mandy." "Hey, hands off!" She moved towards him. Danny turned his head to meet her. "Why? It's not here for show, is it?" And then it suddenly hit him, and he scanned around, a puzzled look on his face. "Anyway, where is everyone?" "Well, you're the first here." She smacked his hand and he dropped the chicken leg that he had picked up. Danny looked surprised. "I'm the first." He lifted his wrist and glanced at the time, saw that it was 10:47. "But I'm nearly 50 minutes late." "Yeah?" Danny frowned. "Well, how many are supposed to be coming?" Mandy shrugged. "I don't know. It depends how many turn up, doesn't it?" "Well, they're leaving it a bit late, aren't they? What's up with them?" "They'll turn up. They've probably just gone for a few drinks first, that's all." Danny's eyes flicked back down to the food on the table. "Well, we can't touch any of this until everyone else gets here." Mandy smiled. "Danny." He looked up at her. "No, you can't." She stared into his big, wide, baby blue eyes. Disappointed baby blue eyes. "Not even a chicken leg?" he pleaded. "No." He clucked his tongue and sighed. "Cheers, Mandy, and I love you too. You can get a drink, though, if you want one." "Oh, thanks. Your hospitality overwhelms me." "You're welcome." Danny shook his head and smiled, his eyes taking in her unusually painted face. He took a step back and caressed her from head to toe with his eyes, apparently liking what he saw. Her tight black top, the cut of the V exposing her ample cleavage, the tight, short black skirt, the fishnet stockings, the long thigh-length boots. "What do you think?" Mandy wanted to know. Danny cocked his head to one side and sucked his bottom lip over his top one. "Not bad." "Not bad?" "Quite sexy," he added. "Yeah, too sexy for you, Danny boy." Danny grinned and then scanned around the room. "So, where's this drink you said I could have?" "The drinks are in the living room." Mandy pointed towards the door. "If you want one, you'll have to go in there." "Right, I'll go and get one then. Do you want anything?" "No, thanks." "Okay." He widened his eyes at her. "See you in a min." He turned and started towards the living room. Mandy was quick. Very quick. The blade of the large kitchen knife sliced through the air and caught Danny just where his neck joined the shoulder, carving through flesh and scraping against bone. More than half the length of the blade sank into Danny's flesh, the tip puncturing a lung. He frowned, his mouth stretching into a wide rictus, not fully realizing what had happened for a moment. Mandy's black lips curled back, white teeth grinding together as she tried to yank the blade out of her victim, twisting it and scraping it against bone again. Her eyes were wide, face contorted in a strained mask of effort. She pulled the blade out, and the eruption began. Danny's crimson life fluid spurted from the wound, the escaping air from the punctured lung acting as a propellant. The blade had severed a major blood vessel, and Danny coughed as blood flooded his lungs and made its way up his trachea, filling his mouth. He tried to scream, but it was impossible, and the blood began to gush over his lips, dribbling to the floor. A red fountain was pulsing from the gash in his neck, cascading down onto the food on the table, covering the meats and sweets with its coppery sauce. Her face twisted with crazed ecstasy, Mandy rammed the knife in again, this time into the back of Danny's neck. It severed his spinal column and exited through his Adam's apple. He began to spasm, his legs buckling beneath him. Mandy could feel his weight increasing, supported by her grip on the knife. He was getting heavier, his legs giving way beneath him completely. Mandy could support him no longer. The weight was too much. She took hold of the knife's handle with both hands and pulled. It came free, the blade grating as it escaped its spinal vice. Like a lifeless rag doll, Danny fell to his knees with all his weight, a low, guttural groan bubbling within his throat. He continued falling sideways and landed on his back, his body convulsing, blood spilling from the corners of his mouth. The ejaculate from his neck wound was now a weak pulse. Mandy stepped forward and stood over her victim. Danny's wide eyes rolled in their sockets and fixed on her own emerald orbs. He couldn't move his head or his mouth, but his eyes said it all. "Why? Why have you done this to me?" And then his eyes left her gaze and rolled back, exposing their whites. His death rattle sounded, muffled and drowned in his bloodied throat. Then he was quiet. Mandy's staring eyes lost focus on Danny's corpse. Why had she done it to him? Why had she plunged her knife into him? She didn't really know the reason why. There wasn't a reason, really, not one that could be considered a reasonable motive for murder. But she had planned it. She had planned it all. Everything. A week ago to the day. She had simply got the urge. It came over her all of a sudden. She didn't know from where. She didn't know why. But something inside her head told her to do it. Dared her. Go on, do it! And Danny had been the first person that came to mind. It was perhaps unfortunate that she had thought of him first, but it had to be someone. If not him, someone else. She knew she must be crazy. One had to be crazy to stick knives into people for no reason. But then there was a reason. She wanted to do it, to see and feel what it was like, and that was as good a reason as any. She had tried to put it out of her mind, telling herself that it was wrong, but it had kept coming back, niggling inside her brain, teasing her and building the desire within her to wonder what it would be like to do it. And the temptation had finally won over, and she'd succumbed. She knew it was evil, but so what? How, though? How to do it? It had been a couple of hours after getting the initial urge. She glanced at the calendar. October 24th. It was Halloween in a week exactly. Yes, she would have a party, an impressive party. She wanted it to be good, and she would invite Danny. Just Danny. Just one guest. A lamb to the slaughter. He was a fellow student at college, a friend she had got on well with, but he was nothing more. There was no sex or love. She didn't want that. It was half-term holiday and she wouldn't be seeing him, so she rang him at home, told him all about it. He was thrilled, said that he'd definitely come and would get a cracking costume to wear. Mandy's eyes focused again on Danny's motionless and bloody corpse. She let out a chuckle. Yes, the costume was quite good. He'd managed to scare her half to death, and he'd brought a knife with him. She couldn't believe that. He'd put the murder weapon right into her hands. She hadn't originally planned to kill him so soon, but when she got that knife in her hands, oh, she just couldn't resist it. The telephone began to ring in the hallway. Mandy jumped as its shrill dragged her out of her reverie, and in the same instant she realised that the music was still playing on the hi-fi. She had been oblivious to it since Danny had arrived. Now, for some reason, she felt a wave of panic passing through her body. She snatched a glance at Danny's corpse, then back up towards the hallway where the phone was ringing. She didn't want to answer it, but... Before she'd even realised it, she had moved into the living room, switched off the music, and was standing by the screaming telephone, reaching slowly out towards the receiver, as if the object would scorch her fingers if she so much as touched it. Her heart was racing. Why? She had just butchered a man without even flinching, and now she was terrified of picking up the phone. Lord! She snatched up the receiver and lifted it to her ear, her eyes twitching nervously. There was a crackle of static on the line, and then a voice. "Hello?" It was a man's voice. Mandy's brow furrowed. "Yes? Mandy, you're not going to believe this." The voice was familiar. "The bloody car won't start." Mandy felt an icy chill run up the length of her spine, as though someone had traced an ice-cold feather along it. She'd recognised the voice, but logic rejected the recognition. "Listen, I'm sorry. I'm going to leave it 5 minutes and then give it another try. I promise I'll try and get there if I can, but if I don't, save us a chicken leg, will you?" Mandy was shaking her head now, trying desperately to reject the recognition of the voice on the line. It couldn't possibly be. Who is it?" she asked, her voice weak and choked. The caller laughed. "What? Don't you recognise my voice?" Tears were forming in Mandy's eyes, her head beginning to spin. "It's me, Mandy. Danny Clark. Bloody hell, is the party so good that you've forgotten all about me?" The telephone receiver slipped from Mandy's hand and bounced on the carpeted floor. 2 steps and she was standing in the doorway of the kitchen, looking down at the spot where Danny Clark's body was. Where Danny Clark's body should have been. Mandy realised that she was holding herself up in the doorway, her knuckles white, legs like jelly. She could hear her heart pumping away inside her head, a pounding engine throbbing like mad. But where was the body? It couldn't have moved. Danny couldn't possibly still be alive after what she had done to him. And then she noticed something else. It was on the floor where the body should have been, something that looked pink and crumpled. Her eyes narrowed. What was it? She couldn't tell from where she was. Her hands released their grip on the doorframe, and she found herself trying to move towards the mysterious object, but her legs were weak and she could only manage 3 steps before they gave way and she fell to her knees. She sucked in her breath as the bolt shot through her body, but she held her gaze on the pink object before her. It was within arm's reach. She shot out her hand and without hesitating curled her trembling fingers around it. Something moist, soft, and sticky. Slowly she brought it closer to her face, her hands shaking. She turned it and saw that it was a different colour on the other side. The pink colour that she had first perceived was actually on the inside, but now she saw the outside. It was a different colour, a lighter colour. Mandy's eyes widened. The colour of skin. Human skin. Behind her, slowly and silently, the back door began to inch open. Mandy hadn't even checked it when she had entered the kitchen. If she had, she would have noticed that it was ajar, would have remembered that she had closed it when she had let Danny in, would have known that someone had opened it since. But she had been too preoccupied with the strange-looking object, as now, which was why she was totally unaware of the figure moving up behind her, still dressed in Danny Clark's blood-soaked clothing. It was within 3 feet of her now. Just as Mandy recognized. She had unfolded the sticky mass and realized that she was staring into another face, a face with no eyes or teeth, but a face nonetheless, a mask, a perfect imitation in every detail, the face of Danny Clark. As the insane screams bounced inside her skull, Mandy failed to notice the 2 hands that were reaching down towards her head from behind. The right hand shot in front of Mandy's face and grabbed a firm hold of her left temple, the forearm covering her eyes. Mandy screamed and dropped the mask, her own hands shooting up to pull off the hand that held her. Her long painted nails sank deep into the flesh of the forearm, but her desperate attempts were futile. The thing's left hand was already grabbing the left side of her head, covering her ear. She knew she couldn't compete with her assailant's strength, but she couldn't give up fighting. She drove her nails deeper and deeper, trying to yank the first hand free again, but it wouldn't budge. Mandy's perfect white teeth threatened to splinter as they ground together, tighter and tighter, every ounce of her modest strength concentrated into her hands. But the thing now had a firm grip, and the nails that were tearing at its forearm didn't deter it. Pain seemed to be a foreign sensation. For all her efforts, Mandy may as well have been trying to yank a sword from a stone. Pressing the tips of its fingers even harder into Mandy's skull, it prepared to twist the head. Mandy's scream whistled through her teeth as she felt the digits digging into her skull. She was convinced that they would penetrate the bone and enter her brain any second. But she had got their intentions wrong. In one quick, sudden movement, the powerful hands twisted Mandy's head through 180 degrees, tearing muscle and rupturing veins. Her spinal column snapped with a loud pop, and Mandy's scream ended abruptly as she was forced to look into the face of her murderer, her head now facing backwards. And for a few terrible seconds she could see. As her body spasmed and twitched in its death throes, she could see. And the vile, horrific face that she glimpsed was not of this world. It was like nothing she had ever seen or imagined before, not even in her worst nightmares. But of course it was Halloween, and such a creature as this could only possibly appear on this one night in the year. And just before Mandy's world blacked out forever, she realized just what it was that she faced. Who it was that had come to take her life. It was the bogeyman, very alive and very real.